So when I was 14, I ruined Christmas. I was at a family Christmas party, and I had ingested probably 4 to 5 times the normal dose of a dissociative anesthetic. For reference, dissociative anesthetics are a type of drug that work on the NMDA receptor system. This system is responsible for essentially analyzing input from the body. This results in the brain trying to fill in the perception that's lost with hallucination. It can also result in out-of-body experiences and astral projection. So I was laying on the couch at this party, at which point I began to slip outside of my body. My point of vantage moved to a corner in the ceiling across the room. I watched from this point as my family members approached me, asked me what was wrong with me, realized I had like 105-degree fever, noticed I wasn't responding to stimulus because my body was essentially comatose. As I sat from this point, I watched their panic unfold. They eventually decide that whether it's a fever or I'm on drugs, I need to be at a hospital. They grab my body and begin to drag it outside. My vantage point follows. I'm standing on the porch, watching as my family drags my limp body into a car. They take me to a hospital. Come to, later, in a hospital. There are things standing around me. I focus in on it, realize that the things around me are my family and doctors. Realize that the noises they're making are them talking about me, about my condition, about their concern for me. The doctors really don't know what they're doing, as they usually tend to. Whenever you get a doctor dealing with drugs, they usually freak out. They're used to opiate overdoses, which are essentially fatal if not treated immediately. This is of a much more subtle and nuanced variety. I'm probably safe. It's not good for my heart, but there's no real immediate treatment. All you really do is wait it out. They say that they're going to transfer me to another hospital. They stick me in an ambulance, and at this point I am fairly lucid. As the ambulance ride progresses, I lose my lucidity again, enter into what's referred to as the hole. In this state, the connection between body and mind is totally shut off. Whatever's happening outside of me has no relationship to my subjective reality. I'm in an entirely different world, uninfluenced by what's outside. I come to later in the new hospital. People are still freaking out. They're talking about my bladder being distended. They say that they're going to need to use a catheter on me. Catheter, for those unaware, is a tube that is inserted into the urethra when urinary retention is present. It's an uncomfortable process, and a degrading one at that. They send my mother out of the room, along with whatever cousins were present, and they catheter me. On dissociatives, pain is felt, but there's no emotional significance to it. Despite this, I let go a dull roar. Shortly after, I was transferred to another room, and my family left for the night. As I lay in this new bed, I sat by myself, and every so often a nurse would come in to check on me. They'd ask me a series of questions to assess my lucidity. Simple questions like, who are you? Where are you? How old are you? What day is it? Who's the president? What year is it? These questions, after a while, began to get taxing and boring. At one point, shortly after they asked me how old I was, I decided that I had had enough and that it was time for me to leave. I left, leaving my body behind. My point of vantage moved to a cafeteria elsewhere in the hospital. I sat there, attempting to pass the time and relax. As I sit there relaxing, my body enters into what's known as a time loop, where the last several seconds or several minutes, depending on context, are repeated in my mind. I'm on autopilot, and the last thing that my body remembers is being asked how old I am. The nurses continued asking me questions, and I continued answering the question that I remembered. They would ask, for instance, who's the president? And I'd say 14. Who are you? 14. What year is it? 14. What day is it? 14. Why are you here? 14. Once in a while, they'd ask how old I was, and I'd get lucky. 14. They found this very jarring. Eventually, I come to the next morning, significantly more lucid than I had been at any point the last night, but still in a very dreamlike, surreal state. I immediately recognize the people around me as my family, and I immediately recognize the noises they make as speech. As they sit around me, they voice their concerns. Doctors come in and tell me that they believe I tried to kill myself. Eventually, they say that I'm going to be enrolled in an intensive outpatient program and that I'm going to leave the hospital that morning. I get in the car with my mother to leave, and as I'm on the highway driving home with her, there's a clear box truck. A box truck where all the walls are made of glass or plastic or some such material. There's a neon sign on the back with messages about the Chicken Man, wishing me a happy Christmas. Inside the van is a man in a long white coat on a laptop, sitting in a chair at a desk, surrounded by live chickens which run around the truck. This did nothing to help my denial of reality. Eventually, I returned home, spent a few uncomfortable days sitting around, was enrolled in the day program, then denied by insurance, at which point I went back to my life of whatever bullshit I call my life.